Okay, so that out of the way, thank you everyone. I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Dr. William Farrell, who will be discussing directories as a source for Anglo-Jewish genealogy, although of course more generally. And William works as a librarian at the University of Leicester, supporting research in the humanities and social sciences. He trains as a historian and works on the economy and society of 18th century Britain. He has published on the silk industry in London, smuggling, and the fiscal military state. With Tim Ranker-Williams at Northampton, he works on a study of apprentice migration from Wales, Scotland, and Ireland to early modern London. He is also interested in digital humanities and historical geographical information systems. He is a book review editor of the publication Local Population Studies and is a committee member of the CILIP Local Studies Group. CILIP is the UK Library and Information Association, and it's actually quite a big deal. So with that done, I would like to welcome William and invite him to share his screen. And
well, thank you, David, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm going to try and both. I do have a presentation which I will share, but I will also try and do some live demonstrating of searching our collection. So I'll start with the presentation and then go to the live demo. And hope that switching between two different things works quite smoothly. We'll see. So I'm just going to do the kind of more formal bit first. There we go. So I've called it Trade Directories for Family and Community History, although I do have most of my examples I've tried to make about Jewish history in the 19th century. So yes, I work at the University of Leicester Library, as David said. One of the things that I do is I manage our special collections online website, which is where our collection of trade and street directories is hosted. So that's why I was volunteered to speak to this when David and Lee first got in contact. So first of all, I know I will, at the beginning, I'll talk a bit more broadly about trade and street directories generally as a source for family historians and for local history. And I will talk about our collection specifically, which some people may have either seen or used before, but I won't go into that just yet because there are several other major collections out there that people may already have used or may use in the future. So I'll go broad and then go a bit more specific. So what is a directory? The short answer, which we used to say to students, was that it was the yellow pages of the 19th century, but current students don't know what the yellow pages is. So to be very technical and a bit dry, a published list of people, businesses, and addresses associated with a city or town. So they are reference works, printed reference works, and the core is very factual and a kind of information source. They were produced on the assumption that this information, these lists, would be useful, mainly for people in business or who needed to use or employ a business, or for people who were visiting an area, possibly for the first time or moving there for the first time. So didn't know their way around, didn't know where important people or buildings were. And also that this information maybe couldn't be obtained anywhere else publicly or easily. By the 19th century, I will talk in the next slide a bit more about the history of directories, but by the 19th century, which is particularly in family and local history, the century people tend to concentrate on and use the most directories. Most directories had moved into a format of containing a business listing and a street listing. So that they were containing both all the local businesses and then a separate listing of people street by street. So the prominent householders in every street. One consequence of that is the 19th century directories became very large, and anyone who has used particularly the Post Office Directory for London in the Victorian and Edwardian period, whether you've used the print copy or an online copy, will know that they became vast. And the Post Office Directory for London by 1910 was split into 6 or 7 volumes, all of 900 to 1,000 pages, because it becomes so big. Other useful business and civic information was also listed in directories. So you will find quite a lot of information about transport and communications, sometimes put under the heading of conveyancing, but essentially both for passenger transport, for moving goods around, using the post office, then using the telegram system and then the telephone system. Also prominent public buildings that you might want to visit or use, and also prominent local people. So the London Post Office Directory started having a section of what they called the court listing, which was essentially well-known and prominent people whose address you might need to ascertain, a separate section for prominent lawyers and legal London, county directories for the countryside, often made a big thing of listing the local aristocracy and gentry, local magistrates, etc. There were also specialized directories for particular industries, and there are some very good ones for the later 19th century and the Edwardian period, which carried on into the 1950s and 1960s, in fact. So there's a lot for textiles and clothing industry, for metalworking and so on. And some of those were considered quite important and went through lots of different volumes. But moving to a totally different sector of the economy and social life, there's actually a lot of directories for the spa towns and the seaside towns. And from quite early on, as soon as the spa towns became very popular with visitors, certainly by the late 18th century, you will find directories for places like Bath specifically. And then when the seaside towns took off, you'll find a lot of 19th century directories, sometimes listed, although their heading may be the county, but you'll find that Brighton, Margate, etc. figure very prominently, and there's a lot of tourist information in those directories. The county directories for the countryside often contain potted local histories and descriptions. That's not a feature of the ones for London and Manchester and Birmingham, because the directories have become so big that they were cramming as much factual information in as possible. But actually the county ones retain quite a lot of local history and kind of interesting descriptions of county towns all the way through the 19th century, and can be a nice source in their own right. I should say I'm concentrating here on Britain because that's what our collection of directories and our library collection at Leicester is about. We have a very good general local and regional history collection, but it's focused on England and Wales. However, directories from the 18th century, directories were being produced in several European countries and also in North America in a very similar way to the way they developed in Britain. So for reasons of space, I'm not going to go into American or European directory collections, but they were being produced in the same way and for the same purposes in other countries at the same time as Britain by different publishers. It was very much a national publishing industry in the 19th century, but there are comparable collections in other countries. And one advantage of Ancestry and Find My Past is that they've joined up directories from different countries really for the first time. But the idea behind the directories is very similar in different countries. A brief history of directories. There's a lot of focus in family history and in local history on the 19th century, as I said, and that's because directories grew in size, so the amount of useful information they had, and also the number of directories being published. But the history is longer than that. So in Britain, the first directories to appear are in the late 17th century. And that's true of some other countries. I think I'm right in saying it's true for the Dutch Republic and for France. And they carry on being produced during the 18th century. In this period, this early period, they are overwhelmingly about listings of urban merchants and tradesmen. So they focus on the major commercial and port cities of Britain and of France, the Low Countries. And also some of the early American ones are organized on that basis as well. In the first half of the 19th century, there is an expansion of publishers and places that directories are being produced about in Britain. So in 1800 to 1850, you get a lot of regional publishers. So there was a feeling that every town and city or every county should have a directory. This is also where the link with the post office in Britain emerged for the first time. So some people may know, particularly if you mainly research family or local history in London, may particularly know them simply as the post office directories. And it's in the 19th century that this link in Britain with the post office emerged. Some of these smaller regional publishers did not survive this early period. It's also quite clear from some studies that have been published trying to compare different directories in this period that there was probably quite a lot of copying of other people's directories, as some people clearly entered the directory trade as a way of trying to get into something that appeared to be a short-term money-making operation. There was also a lack of official information to reuse or copy, and I'll say something about that on the next slide. In the second half of the 19th century, there's a consolidation of publishers, which started with essentially consolidation in the south of Britain and the north of Britain and in Scotland. So that's the way the consolidation happened. So more successful regional publishers bought up other local publishers. Kelly's, who are now the most famous directory publisher in Britain, this is when they emerged as one of the major publishers, and they concentrated on the south of England. And then Piggott's, who became the major publisher for the north of England and the Midlands. Eventually, Kelly's took over Piggott's as a business, although they retained the name for some directories. Although there's lots of focus about Victorian directories, including in our collection, the interwar period in Britain, the 1920s and 1930s, is actually the peak of directory production. And it's really right up until the late 1930s is the real peak of directory production. So there's been less focus on the interwar period. There was obviously the two wars caused a big drop-off in publication, and the Second World War, a big dramatic drop-off in publication because of paper rationing. Although the most directories were produced in this period, in terms of online sources, there has not been so much focus, and that's originally mainly due to copyright law in Britain and also the United States and other countries. So when we originally digitized our collection at Leicester, which is over 20 years ago now, the interwar period was out of bounds because those directories were still in copyright. We have now entered a period in the last few years where that's not true of the 1920s in both Britain and the United States. So one thing that might happen in the future, and I hope it does, is that we will be able to digitize a similar number of directories for the interwar period and make them freely available online. Ancestry and Find My Past might already have done this. I haven't checked with their collection recently, so they may have already done that under a commercial basis, but hopefully we'll be able to digitize and release more directories for the general public and the general family historian from this period in the next few years. I'm not saying we have at Leicester we have an active plan to do that, but we have talked about it, and somebody else may do it instead as a big project, but it's an obvious thing that may happen. Next. One thing that all family historians or people doing local history should be aware of is how the information was collected and organised. Particularly the post office directories, because they're so big and the link with the post office, you can easily assume that it has a very official and organised status to the information in the same way as the census, which is being produced at the same time. But you do have to be careful even with Kelly's post office directory, and understand some quirks of how these books were compiled, edited, and then made available to people. Some of the earliest and also some of the smaller directories may have been compiled either from pre-existing information someone might have been able to access. So it's particularly true in London, where the City of London Corporation was keeping registers of people in particular trades linked with delivery companies, and they probably formed the information that some of the earliest directories used. Or individuals who had professional knowledge of a sector or a town and essentially use their business contacts to start building out the directory. From the late 18th century, people publishing directories started to use agents who they sent out into the town or the city to collect the information door to door. So in a very similar process to the way the census started to be collected by census enumerators. Some directory publishers also use surveys, so they sent printed surveys out to people and asked them to return them. Kellys and Pigott started to use a system where the agents would knock on the door of the business address or the house they were interested in, and if you answered the door, the agent asked you some questions and wrote down the answers in a pro forma. If you weren't in or nobody answered, they left a survey, they put a survey through the post box and asked you to return it by post if you wanted to be in the directory. So they did try and collect as much information as possible, but probably as with today, if there was no obligation to fill in the survey and you had to return it yourself through the post, probably only businesses that really, really wanted to be in the directory returned the printed surveys. Kellys, who became the publisher of the post office directory, Frederick Kelly, who founded the company, worked for the post office in London, and he used post office employees for many years to collect the information. So he quickly saw that postmen had obviously a great familiarity with streets and who lived on them, and he used them to collect the information. In the mid-19th century, his use of the post office employees was controversial, and there was actually a parliamentary inquiry into this because it had a semi-official status, which was always slightly ambiguous. And he kind of got away with it in the end, but that's how the early Kellys directories were collected. Adverts were paid for by businesses, which is obvious, but it's worth pointing out. Kellys was making quite a lot of money from the advertising sections by the late 19th century. People paid quite a lot of money, particularly for full-page ads. There is some evidence, though, so this is something you have to watch out for when you're using the listings, that Kellys particularly took money for people to be listed first in the listings under specific trades. So in the section for furniture wholesalers, you could pay to be listed at the top of the listing. So if your name was further down the alphabet, you could pay to be listed first. You'll also see in some of the directories, and I think I have an example on the later slide, you could pay in a listing under the business headings to have a very small advert or kind of small illustration to give you more prominence in a listing as well. As I say at the bottom of the slide, although Kellys post office directory acquired a semi-official status because of the link with the post office, all the directories were commercial products. There was no official obligation to be listed in a directory, even in the street directory, and there were no real official regulations about how the directory should be organized or an official obligation to publish one. So the post office directories became very popular very quickly, so they carried on publishing them. But they carried on because they were commercially successful, and Kelly became a separate commercial business from the post office. Okay, with those caveats in mind, what are directories good for family and local historians? First of all, who lived on a street? So if you're interested in your history of your house or where you live, the street listings, particularly the later 19th century ones, are a very good starting point to who lived in which house, in which street. They're also, again, their prime function, who is in business in a town or a city or a suburb. Those two things combined, and for a reason I'll come on to, mean they're very good for urban middle class life in the 18th, 19th and Edwardian period generally. Because they had other contextual information, they're actually quite good for general civic life in the 18th, particularly the 19th century. And I have some slides about that later. They're quite good at reflecting new and specialized trades, and I have an example on the right of a very specialized trade which I happened to see as I was preparing for this yesterday and getting diverted by the listing. So there were only 2 people listed as mousetrap makers in London in 1914, but there they are. If you needed someone to make you a mousetrap, those 2 people could supply you. One reason for this is because when most of the agents went out to ask people, do you want to be in the directory? And then they would say, what is your business or your trade? People self-reported their trade or their business sector. And although some of those might have been altered slightly to get people under certain headings, generally the evidence is that the directories went with what you said you did. And combined with the fact that there's a lot of directories that appear in the non-census years, the directories are quite good at reflecting new occupations and trades and things that are very specialized. And that can help you if you do know something about an ancestor's line of work. Also, if you are interested in business and economic history, they're quite good at that. So when electricity came out in the late 19th century, lots and lots of new occupations and businesses emerged. The same thing is true with the spread of gas when municipal gas came out. And the directories are very good at reflecting how quickly different occupations emerged from technological changes. Some of the adverts are also quite good for that because people who had cornered a market were very keen to promote what they did, particularly if it seemed new and exciting. They're good for general local and business information broadly. So if you're interested in the area, in a particular area, the directory for the time and the place is good generally for that, for kind of browsing and seeing what you can get out of it. Some people have used them to confirm name changes for buildings and businesses. They're particularly good for the history of pubs and theatres, which have changed their name many times over the years. If you combine them with a map, like the Ordnance Survey map, they're quite good for confirming what the name was in the 1890s, for example. They're also very good sources for visual advertising in the later 19th century and Edwardian period, and in an era where visual advertising seems quite fun and quirky now. So after about 1850 or 1860, printing technology for engraving changed, and it became much more feasible to have a lot of illustrations in printed publications and for people to commission specific designs and logos and illustrations with adverts. And so the back of the directories became full of visual adverts. They're quite fun to look at. In academic history, they're quite underused as a source. So there's definitely, if people are looking for bigger projects, something to do with the visual advertising, there's some kind of bigger project that people could do with that. Some things to, so those are the strengths, these are the weaknesses, some things to watch out for. The first, which can confuse you, particularly if you're using the online versions and keyword searching, is some people were listed twice, once under the street directory heading and again under the business directory heading. And so sometimes you can start getting confused if you're going through a directory a lot and think, have I already seen this person? But sometimes people were listed twice. Some businesses were also listed under multiple headings. So there's a lot of 19th century businesses which said they were importers, exporters, general wholesalers and manufacturers of certain goods or multiple goods at once. And so they often asked to be under multiple headings or were put there. So sometimes they were duplicated. So that's for anyone looking to count lists of surnames, particularly, I would watch out for this, because if you do a quick keyword search for whole directory, if you've got a digital copy and you do you're interested in particular surnames, there are definite duplicates in the directories because of this double or even triple listing of the same person. The street directory, only the heads of household were recorded. So that means that women and domestic servants, children, live-in apprentices are under-recorded as a result, and the post-1851 census will have a lot more details of the whole household than a street directory does. Another issue with the street directories, it's quite clear that some streets were not surveyed very heavily or at all if they were thought to be difficult to collect information from. And this is particularly true of 19th century London, Manchester, Glasgow, Liverpool. So areas that were considered to be rough and postal employees or other agents didn't really want to walk down, they didn't visit them. There's also a feeling that there was less commercial value in who lived, the knowledge of who lived in those streets. So it was seen as possibly a waste of time. And the extent of multiple occupancy of premises and some very convoluted backstreet layouts meant they were quite difficult to get around anyway. So poorer areas of the major cities are underreported in the street directories. And again, the census is much better for poorer areas of major cities where an effort was made to try and visit every single household. For the business listings, the person who is listed, whose name is listed against the business, is the owner, the manager, or the agent. So the employees, particularly manual workers, clerks, shop assistants, apprentices, are under-recorded. Some of those people might appear in the street directory if they were the head of household and they lived in a fairly respectable street, but it adds up to their under-recording of that type of person. I couldn't find much published research on this, but I think it must be true that non-English speakers or people who were not confident speakers of English as a second language must have been underreported because they were either asked verbally in English, are you the head of household, do you want to be in the directory, or they were asked to fill in an English language survey and then send it back by post. So there must be an assumption that non-English speakers were underreported. And again, the census is probably better there, where the enumerators were supposed to make an effort to capture everybody if they could. A more technical issue, but causes a lot of problems with the digitized computer versions of the directories, is their very cramped layouts. So this is true of the later 19th century directories in particular. They ended up, there was so much information to squeeze in, they end up using a multi-column layout of even triple or 4 columns, and the font size gets smaller and smaller. There's a lot of a use of abbreviations, inconsistent use in multiple directories of commas and the abbreviation system, and subheadings breaking up the page in random places, plus the little advertising logos and trademarks appearing in some of the business listings. And that means they can be confusing to read sometimes, but they're really confusing for computer software to read. And so we know from feedback on our collection and of some other similar collections that people can find them frustrating to use, particularly if you're searching for common surnames, or you really think someone is there and you can't find them. And this is really the source of the issue with computerized keyword searching. Even in 2024, it struggles with the layout, the very small text, and the use of abbreviations. Also things you'll find, some directories list people surname, space, first name. Some people are listed surname, comma, first name, and some people are listed first name, surname. And this is often inconsistent in different directories, and again, can cause problems with computerized keyword searching. I'm now going to turn to our collection, and I will do a demonstration just for anyone who's interested in using our directory, our collection. So the collection at the University of Leicester, which is on our online special collections platform, and is free for everyone to search, to browse, and to download the full text of the directories. We provide access to 689 directories for England and Wales from 1766 to 1914. And we do have some directories for the late 18th and early 19th century. However, one thing to understand about our collection is that it was digitized partly with the interest of academic, social and economic historians in mind. So in terms of what was digitized and why, it was decided to try and get close to a representative sample for some key decades. So the core of the collection is one directory for every English and Welsh county in the decades 1850s, 1890s and the 1910s. And that was partly to have a kind of equal geographical coverage, also to be able to track change over some key snapshot decades, but also that the directories could be linked up with the census for 1851, 1891 and 1901. So that's why some people ask, why did you digitize these directories particularly? And that's kind of the explanation for the core of our directory. Some people think that it's every single directory that we have in the library at Leicester, and that's not true. It's actually more directories than we hold, so we used other libraries' directories to create the collection. The version you see on our website is searchable by name, by place, and by occupation, and also actually general text. We have Kelly's directories, including the post office directories. We also have Piggott's directories, so the two most famous publishers, but we do have regional publishers who are smaller and more obscure. One thing I would say to people who have been using our collection or might use it in the future is that it's over 20 years old now. In fact, the original project conception is even older than that, and it's very large. Partly reflecting the number of directories that were digitized, but also how big the directories are and the amount of text each directory contains. And in digital history and internet terms, that means it really is quite old, and it is showing its age a bit, and I don't mind admitting that. So if you are going to search it, particularly for surnames, please be patient, because it will take a while to return results and also for you to go through page by page if that's what you decide to do. But when I come to the demonstration, I will suggest some slightly different ways of coping with this that you might find easier. And as I will say in the demonstration, it's free to search and browse, but you can also download whole directories as PDF free of charge, and some people might find that easier. So some of this I've already said. I would say to anyone who's researching the history of their own family or somebody else's, or researching surnames, I would strongly recommend you use the version in Ancestry. So we licensed our collection to Ancestry some years ago, and it forms the core of their collection, which I think is called Trade and Street Directories. There are other directories added to it, but it's the core of that collection which they have built up. So if that's your core interest, I strongly recommend using the Ancestry version. You will find it easier and quicker to search. Particularly if you want specific people, you will find it easier. So we say that on our website, and I'm happy to repeat it here. If you're going to concentrate on a particular city or town or a decade, I would recommend downloading the PDFs that we have for that city or that decade onto your own computer, and then searching the PDFs on your own computer offline. I think you'd probably find that easier as well. If you are interested in doing some more advanced data analysis, text mining, something very complicated, I would recommend using the version of our data, our collection that is in the UK Data Archive, which is a UK government-funded repository of data that's come out of various social science research projects. We deposited the original images from the digitization and also the underlying text in the UK Data Archive. And you can download that version for free and reuse it for more complicated things yourself. In the UK Data Archive, it is confusingly called Digital Library of Historical Directories. That's the name you need to search for in their catalogue to find it. When you search that title, you will see that it's broken down into multiple collections by region of Britain. If you're interested in a particular place, that makes it easier. If you do want to download all the directories, the whole collection, you do have to download a lot of files. So you need to block out an afternoon to do that. But if you are interested in doing that, that's the version I'd recommend you try, and not downloading all the PDFs on our website. I'll go into the live demo in a moment, but I'll just point out various things you could use our collection and other directories for. So an obvious thing is to search for surnames. There are lots and lots of surnames in there, and you will get lots of results back, particularly for common surnames. This is an obvious point to all family historians, but I will repeat it. The more common the surname, the more results, and the longer it will take to go through them. And surnames which are both words which are both surnames and occupation, like Taylor, you will be overwhelmed with results, particularly for the directories for London and Manchester and so on. But be patient because they are there. You can use the directories to find famous people. This was one of the purposes of the 18th and particularly the 19th century directories. They made an effort to, as I said earlier, to put the addresses of prominent people. And so you can find people like Disraeli listed in, this is in the General Street Directory listing for Hewingdon in Buckinghamshire, where he later lived. He's there along with all the people in that village, or the prominent people in that village. They're very good for local businesses and for the local neighbourhood layouts. So so this is a typical layout for the Post Office London directory, where you have these nice listings by street. So the heading of the street or the section of the street, and then who's living there. And these are quite good for getting a sense of the local area just by looking at them, really, because you get both the number of the house or the premise, and you get actually quite a nice mixture of local businesses, prominent people, if it was thought worth listing them, interesting or considered important amenities, in this case the market and who was dealing in the market, but you also get public buildings. They also started later recording where the letterboxes were, the pillar boxes, where train stations were within the street, where a telegram office was, etc. So a sense of what someone was like. The street directory listings can be quite good for that, as well as the business directory listings. They're quite good for religious history. So it was considered in the 19th century axiomatic that people would want to know local places of worship. So in most directories in the 19th century, all prominent churches, chapels and synagogues are listed. So you will find, I did a search earlier in the week for synagogues, you get a lot of results back. The earliest one I could find in our collection was for Hull in 1823. But given the quirks of the searching of it, you might be able to find one that's listed earlier. They're also good for general civil society, charities, membership societies, and so on. They started to be, from the mid-19th century, to be listed, and the listings grew. So you can find civil society, membership society, charity organizations listed. What's being listed is usually either the head office, where the secretary or chairperson lived, or with hospitals and so on, where the main hospital was. They're also good for arts and entertainment. So you can find museums, art galleries, theatres, music halls, pubs, and so on in the directories. And as I said earlier, they're very good for sources for advertising, which in the academic history is underused. And there's definitely anyone with a creative mind could reuse these, I think, in some interesting way, particularly because all the ones in our collection are out of copyright. The one on the left I include just because it's the kind of thing that's worth thinking about if you're interested in local and urban history. You'll notice that they're a general dealer in poultry and game, J.W. Staples here, who had a premise in Brighton. But you'll notice right at the end of the advert, they do say that they supply kosher poultry to Jewish families. And it's interesting thinking about, does that imply something about the status of the Jewish community in Brighton and Hove at this point, or its popularity as a holiday resort for people from London in this period? I don't know the answer, but it's the kind of thing they can prompt. If people think it's important to mention it in an advert, it must signify some kind of importance for the business. The one on the right doesn't have a Jewish connection, but it's just a nice example of the very small illustrated adverts you get. People could pay to have within the listings if they wanted to, and which again, I think this is under research, but from what I understand, these drawings and designs were either commissioned or submitted by the business and were not done by Kellys or Pigotts. So they're quite quirky and quite individualized and different from each other. I was going to pause there and just demonstrate how our collection could be used in some ways very quickly, and some quirks. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides. I don't know if David, it's okay to take any questions if people had questions at this point, or whether you'd rather wait right till the end.
Shall we wait till the end? It's probably
okay, sure.
Thank you.
Bear with me whilst I okay, so I'm switching to sharing the internet, which I hope will work. So if you Google University of Leicester Trade Directories collection, you will either come to this page, which is the home page of all our digitized special collections. And the Directories collection is the one that's listed first. We call it Historical Directories of England and Wales. That's just what we call it. But you might also come to this page instead, which is the sort of home page for the collection. There's a bit of blurb here about the collection and its history. There's also a link to the abouts of the background pages and some tips on how to search the collection, including a video that I created a few years ago. So if you do struggle, there is a video which takes you through some of the things I'm going to say now as well. You'll also see we do say on the homepage, you might want to use the Ancestry collection instead. If you want to concentrate on a particular area, we do have all the counties listed here at the bottom. And if you click on London, for example, You should get all the London directories that we have should appear as a list now. Or if you want to browse all of them at once, if you click browse, you'll get all 698 listed for you. See that the oldest one is for Liverpool from the 1760s, although it's actually a reprint. And so if you do think I just want all the London ones and I want to work with them in my own time, if you use, sorry, I'll do that again. If you browse all of them, on the left-hand side, there are some filters, and the two main ones are by period, which are decades, or by place. And if you do want all the London ones, for example, if you click on London, there are 91. And if you did want all of them, the London ones, and you want to browse them in your own time, you could click on the title of a directory, which I hope is now going to load. Should do, because it's not that big. So this is the oldest one we have for London from 1808, but there are much older ones for London than this. And if you go to the right-hand side, to download the whole directory as a PDF is the first icon here. That's the download button. And if you click all, that will download all 385 pages of that directory as a PDF onto your computer. And you can use that, save that, and use it in your own time. So if you do want individual directories and you want to come back to them, that's the way I recommend. Go click through to the title of the one that you want and download, which is the third icon here, and download all. This item is confusing. It means the first page or the page that you're on. So if you do this item, you'll just get the title page here. So you need to do all for all the pages. I'll go back. If you're starting right from the beginning, the thing I suspect most people actually might want to do is at least test out searching for names or places or occupations. To do the keyword searching, I recommend clicking Advanced Search, which is in the top right corner here. And there are several things you need to do. The first is to confirm which collection you are searching. If you just want the trade and street directories that we have, you want to tick the first box, Historical Directories of England and Wales, and make sure nothing else is selected. So if everything, sometimes the system will reset itself and you'll have everything selected. So if you untick select all, then tick historical directories, and then if you need to, click save. That will make sure you're searching the right collection. The next box down where it says enter search term is for general keyword searching. So if you're searching for names, places, occupations, or general searching of the text, then leave all fields as it is, don't change it unless you want to find a particular directory. But if you're doing general keyword searching, keep it for all fields and then enter your search term in this box. If you're searching for a person, you have various decisions to make at this point, which according to how common the name or the surname is and how much of the name you know, you will probably have to test out a couple of different ways of doing it. So I'm going to try someone who I know is in a directory, who's called Theodore Cohen, and he lived in Middlesex in the late 19th century or early 20th century. One issue with the layout in the directories is, as I said earlier, some of the directories have first name, surname. Some of them are done surname, first name. Some of them use abbreviations for people's first names if they're running out of space in the line of text. Some of them use a comma after the surname and some of them don't. So you have a decision whether you want to just search the name as it is and just see what happens, or whether you want to search it as a phrase and the exact format or spelling. So the default is it will search If we click search now in blue, it will find a page in a directory which has these two words present. So they may not be in the same line of text. So it will find some Cohens who aren't Theodore and some Theodores who had a different surname. So you might want to try changing that to the exact phrase, Theodore Cohen. That will tell the search engine to find the word Theodore next to the word Cohen in the same line of text. But here you will probably have to try doing Theodore Cohen and Cohen Theodore, because there were probably directories using both. So you need to do a bit of experiment, and I'll try and show that in a second. Also, I have to say the phrase searching, the exact searching in our search engine can be a bit hit and miss, and that's to do with how confusing the computer finds multiple column layout. So, but it's worth giving it a go at least. So Theodore Cohen as a phrase, so trying to be really exact, doesn't produce any results. And you can immediately think, oh, he's not in this collection, or this is something's gone wrong. But if I do it backwards, now I get 5 results. 5 results means 5 directories where these words are present. It's not necessarily the number of times these words appear in total in the whole collection. So particularly if you're interested in surnames, if you just did Cohen, it might tell you there are 300 results, but that's 300 directories where the surname Cohen appears and not the number of times Cohen is mentioned. You won't get that answer from the number that was recorded here. So if you want to do that kind of quantitative analysis, or just interested, you'll need to kind of work that out yourself. And that's why I say using the PDF versions offline, you might find that easier. So you'll get, we get 5 directories where this name appears, or should appear. You can resort. The default is supposed to be period covered ascending, so the oldest first. You can resort to the more recent one first. You can resort to relevance, which should be the more exact or precise version of your keywords. And you can resort by publisher, A to Z by title. So given that the Kelly's directory for Essex, Herts and Middlesex appears first when I do it by relevance and period ascending, fingers crossed, a Theodore Cohen is actually here. When it loads the results, it will show you the page that appears will be the first page that the words appear on. It won't highlight those words on this viewing, and I'll talk about that in a second. It tells us there are 4 results in this directory. And up here in this search box, it confirms what the words we've searched on are. Because the directories are so long, you can get a bit confused here. So I recommend using this tab called Filtered. And this now shows you the pages that the words appear on only. So sorry, 4 results mean 4 instances of these words. And if you do filtered, it's on 2 pages only, page 381 and 681. For the very large later 19th century directories, the filtered, I recommend switching to the filtered tab because you can get confused quite easily. As I said, on this initial viewing, it won't highlight the words for you. To see the highlighted words on the page, click the expand button here, which is this blue button. I hope on Zoom that has loaded a bigger version of the page. And he is listed here. If this page doesn't highlight the word that you want, use the search button that's on the top left of this new view and research at least one of the words, and it will then re-highlight, in this case in green. It is a quirk of our system that sometimes it remembers to highlight it for you and sometimes it doesn't. So if it doesn't highlight, don't panic. Click on the search box on the left-hand side and then research for at least one of the keywords. And so there he is. If you knew a bit more about this person, so you did know the at least the place that he lived in, or maybe the street, that would be something you could add in to get a better search result. He lived specifically in, I assume, near Mill Hill, because the station is listed at the top. So that's how to search for a person. As I said, if you do know a bit more information and you think it would help you find the person, we could have added in the street he lived in. And we should get the same result back. We get only 2 results now because it's more specific, but he may be in this other directory for Middlesex as well. If you are not searching for people, but you're interested in occupations, or you know the occupation of an ancestor, you can do that as well. So I'm going to try and take a more specific occupation to get some slightly better results. I'm going to do an occupation. I'm going to search for ostrich feather manufacturers, which became a trade associated with the Jewish community, particularly in London and some of the other port cities. Even so, having practiced earlier this week, there's quite a lot of people associated with the ostrich feather trade. So there are at least 63 directories where ostrich feather manufacturers appear. The first one we're given is for Manchester and Salford. You see there's at least 23 results for this occupation. I'll do the filter just to make it more meaningful. I'll expand, and if I just do ostrich again, there you can see Miss Emily, ostrich feather dyer, confectioner and newsagent, an unusual combination of occupations, and you can see there is her street address as well. This is quite a nice listing because you can see the number of women who are listed. Women are often listed with Mrs. or Miss before the first name, whereas you can see that men aren't. That's a Victorian convention of how people should be, how women should be addressed. You can also see another thing that always confuses the computer is where you've got multiple listings for the same surname, in this case Gibson, and it does the ditto convention instead of reproducing the surname. And again, this can confuse the computerized keyword searching. And maybe another, if you're not finding someone who you're sure is there, or it seems to take ages to find them on the page, this kind of layout or way of presenting the names could be the culprit. Sometimes in the street directory listing, women are just given as Mrs. and their surname and not their first name, whereas you'll find men are given both the first name and the surname is listed. And again, that's just another quirk of how Victorians thought people should be addressed, or their name recorded officially. And then a final thing you could be searching our collection for is places. So who lived on my street? I'm going to search a local place in Leicester, just because I'll get less results back. So and to search for Grace Road. If you're looking for a particular street or place in a city, you've got 2 options. So do the name of the street. You can do it as a phrase, try it as a phrase or without. You could then add the city or the town here. So it is a street in Leicester, so I'm going to add it. But you could wait until you get your search results back and then use the filter by place instead. So there are two ways of doing it, and you might want to try both, particularly if you think there should either be more information about a street or you haven't found it at all. So sometimes add the city or the town here, or filter by the place later on. And so we'll just go to the first result. One quirk which does annoy people in our collection is if you do multiple keywords, so you do that Grace Road and Leicester search that I did, when you get to the results, it will add, you'll see that we're searching Grace Road and Leicester, and it's now will be highlighting the word "and" as well, which is annoying because you don't really want that. So I recommend, if it does do that, so it displays "and" or in capital letters, remove them and then research on this sidebar, and you'll see you get a lot fewer results, and it's probably what you want. I'll expand again, and this is an example of how it can be annoying because it's found the word Leicester, the word Grace as somebody's name, and the word road, but that's not the Grace Road in Leicester that I wanted. So I'm just going to take Grace Road out, Leicester out and research. The other way to do this is to browse alphabetically by the listing. There we go. So even if you supposedly know what you're doing, it can take a while to go through the results in this collection, but there is Grace Road that I wanted, which is the home of the cricket ground, which was fairly new at this location at the time this directory was made. Okay, that's the basic of the searching. The same thing I go through in the video, which is listed on the tips on how to search, which is on this page here, and is also on YouTube, and people can find it on YouTube. So if that was too quick, I understand this is being recorded anyway, but the same how to search is on YouTube and on our page. And the main thing is to experiment a little, to try different ways of searching, have a bit of patience going through the results and sorting them. And if you do get frustrated, download a whole directory for the place you're interested in and search it offline on your own computer. I hope that made sense to people and I wasn't going too quickly. I do have a final few more slides just to make a final quick points, and then I will take questions because I can see there have been some in the chat. There are other collections that aren't ours that are out there. Ours is the biggest free collection for England and Wales, which is why it's fairly well known and still fairly well used 20 years on. It is our most downloaded and viewed collection. However, there is a comparable collection for Scotland, which the National Library of Scotland maintain, and on a similar basis to us. So it's of a similar size, covers a very similar time period. If you want Glasgow and Edinburgh or Aberdeen, use the collection that's in the National Library of Scotland website. It's also free to use and download. As I said already, our content is also in Ancestry, and for family historians, for people interested in surnames more generally, you may find the Ancestry collection easier. Find My Past has a similar collection. I'm not sure how it's been created because we licensed our stuff specifically to Ancestry, but they do have their own Directories collection. The Guildhall Library in London have a very good print collection of trade and street directories generally. It's very good for London, but they do have other places in Britain as well. So if you prefer to use a print version or you want directories that have not been digitized, including 20th century directories that are in copyright, the Guildhall Library is a good place to go for print copies, and a very knowledgeable staff as well. The Internet Archive, the Hathi Trust Digital Library, and Google Books have digitized trade and street directories that aren't in our collection or the National Library of Scotland's, and they will have American content that we don't have, probably some content for Ireland as well, and for other non-English countries. And so if you are looking for a place and you can't find a directory for it in our collection or the National Library of Scotland, or for the particular year or decade you're interested in, and also if you're interested in the 1920s and 1930s, it's worth trying those three sources because they may have something that we or the National Library of Scotland don't have. And I suspect they will be quicker to put some of the 1920s ones online. And I think there are some there anyway. So do check those sources as well. They're not in a particular sub-collection in any of those three websites that I'm aware of, although I might be wrong about the Internet Archive. So it would be going to those three websites and searching for the directory of the place that you're interested in to see if it's there. Some further reading, if you get very into directories or you just want to know more, there are two good books that I do recommend to people. The Shaw and Tipper book about British directories, although most of it is a bibliography, which seems a bit old-fashioned now, the introduction is very good in explaining how directories worked and the history of the directory publishing business. And if you do use them a lot, it's actually a very useful introduction to the whole topic. It hasn't been reprinted since 1997. There are a lot of copies in libraries and on the second-hand market out there, but it hasn't been reprinted for some time. But you can get hold of a copy either in a library, because a lot of local reference libraries would have bought a copy. And it turns up in the second-hand market quite a lot. Atkins' book about London specifically is very similar to the Shaw and Tipper book, but concentrates just on London, and again has a very good introduction. Our background pages are free to read and go through a lot of the same points as in those two books, but in a slightly more condensed way. But if you want to get to some background information quicker, the about pages on our website, which are listed there, will get you started. I maintain an online bibliography for people who get really, really interested in this topic. At that listing, it's free to read, and it has a mixture of major collections which are online or in print, some guides to understanding directories, and also research which has reused trade and street directories as the main evidence base. And I do try and keep it as up to date as I can. I did go through the section for studies which have used directories for Jewish history and also for immigration and ethnic minorities in the 19th century generally. And I have to say, there's not a lot that has been published, certainly about Britain, that clearly uses directories. So I do think it's an area where anyone who's interested in writing something a bit more substantial, where there's probably, it would be a worthwhile project or area to explore. The best studies that I could find were about Welsh immigrants to Hull and Middlesbrough, but there you go. So there's definitely more, even though they've been very well used for many years, there is still a lot more you could do with directories, both by the family historian and by the local historian or the business historian. And I hope what I've said today has highlighted some of the areas you could use them if you've never used them before. I hope it explains some quirks of our collection and how it can be used. And I hope has been encourage people to go off and have a go at using them specifically, whichever collection or website you go to. So that's the end of the talk. The only final thing is that's the email address for Special Collections at Leicester, which is the department that maintains the collection online, as well as the whole Special Collections online platform. We're always happy to answer questions from users. If you are looking for a particular personal place and you think it should be in our collection and you can't find it, if you want more information about what we have, and also if you are interested in doing more with it or adding to it, we're always happy to talk to people. We have collaborated on some projects in the past, but we will take general inquiries from anybody, however small or big they are. So that's our email address. So do contact us on that email. It goes to myself and my colleagues. That's the URL of our collection again, just in case you missed it the first time. So thank you for listening to me. I'm going to stop the presentation here. I'm aware I've talked for quite a long time now. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Great, thank you very much. Could I first just ask for a round of applause for William? That was absolutely excellent.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. If people have questions, can they either raise an electronic hand or start waving madly at the screen? But if I can quickly ask a few questions first. My understanding is that copyright is 70 years, which means that directories up to 1953 will be out of copyright. And you mentioned the interwar period, but are there any plans to sort of digitize either by yourselves or by Ancestry the sort of interwar directories or the immediate post-war directories?
At Leicester, we've definitely discussed doing the 1920s and the 1930s, but we haven't got far in terms of a concrete project. As I said, I haven't checked Ancestry or Find My Past recently, so there may well be people on this meeting who know that collection better. They may already have added to it, particularly for America, where copyright law is a bit more liberal than us. But if people, particularly family history societies who are interested in adding more of the 1920s and 1930s, we would be interested in a collaborative project in the future, and certainly exploring it with family history societies who were interested in doing that. If you want to go ahead and do it yourself, you don't need our authority or National Library of Scotland. So if you were in the position to just do it yourself, it's definitely feasible and would be a good project for someone. But if you were interested in collaborating with Leicester, do get in touch with us. We do know there's been some projects connected with the British Library where some people are also interested in digitizing more directories. So there are some other library and academic projects or people that we're aware of who would be interested in doing so. But as always, the people who are most interested and will probably do it quicker are Ancestry and Find My Past.
Yeah. Just before the meeting, we were discussing sort of geographical information systems and, for example, the Layers of London project, where essentially they're taking information out of directories and other documents and mapping them. Obviously, you would face an enormous task in so doing, but probably it would be about the most useful use of this technology in terms of local history. I mean, are there any plans to do that?
Well, there was a project which the National Library of Scotland ran about 10 years ago where they tried to do this to link the directories to the Ordnance Survey maps, because the National Library of Scotland has a very good collection of digitised Ordnance Survey maps, which are also free on their website.
Yeah.
I recommend, by the way, for anyone who's interested in the local history side of things, if you sit with the directory, an online version of the directory and the old digitized OS map at the same time, it can be very useful to understand what you're looking at. They tried to basically do exactly what you said, to extract names and business addresses and buildings from the directories and link them to the OS maps they had digitized. And they really struggled to get it to work. And there are some published papers about that project. And they even created a software that was doing it, but the results weren't that great, and nobody really used the software or built on it. However, there is a project connected with the British Library, which is run by a guy called Daniel Wilson, who he is also interested in this, and he has definitely been running some experiments with some computer science people to do this. And he would certainly be interested in any societies or organizations who were doing something similar. So people have definitely worked on it, and I think there's definitely at least one project I know of where people are trying to do this, but it's very difficult to do it in a way that particularly family historians and local historians would find useful. If you had a very niche project, so if you just want to study Hull in 1890 and it's kind of all for your own purpose, you could probably get something to work and for your kind of interest and analysis. You'd probably make something happen. But it's when you want to do it at scale in a way that most people would find interesting and could use, that's where all the problems have run into. But it's definitely worth, if you're interested, it's definitely worth keeping in touch, because there are people currently trying to work on it. Yes.
Thank you. And so one last question from me. Do you know if there's an equivalent Dutch collection to yours, especially an Amsterdam collection?
I don't know, and I did check my bibliography and I couldn't find anything that I had listed, but there's various other things that are available for Dutch history, and particularly Amsterdam. So it could be worth, it would definitely be worth making an effort to look and even contact people in libraries or universities in Amsterdam, because the Dutch universities have been quite keen on this kind of project.
Yes.
And they've done quite a few other things that are a bit like Directories. So I would definitely, I don't know of one, but I would definitely make the effort to look, because it's the kind of thing they might have done.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So let's go to questions from the floor. Bernard, you are first, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I first of all thank you for a fascinating presentation. When you started, I didn't think that I was going to have anybody that I could start looking for, but it was when you showed one of the examples of a society collector, and I'm trying to find information about somebody who is shown in a marriage certificate as a society collector, and has a very distinctive, unusual name. So I think that's going to be valuable. But then that got me thinking of other people who I thought probably wouldn't appear because they weren't businesses. David asked the first question I was going to, which was about copyright. So I'm going to move straight on to my second question, which is, since I didn't expect to find a lot of my immediate family in directories, because as far as I know, none of them were businesses or professionals, going back at least to the beginning of the 20th century. Do you have any estimation, presumably from comparing with census results, as to what proportion of the adult population would have appeared in these registers at different points in time, or is it something you've not looked at yet? And thanks again for the presentation.
Thank you for the question. I don't have the figure offhand, but there are definitely some published studies by historians who are interested in the census and the directories where they have actually looked at this question. So if I've got time, I'll try and find it in my bibliography or send it around later. But people have tried to estimate this, and everyone who's done it says the general population is clearly underreported, and you will get more. The census is the first place to go for anyone who is not a business owner or a professional, as you said, and for women and children. The census is clearly better for the later 19th century and the Edwardian period. The studies will give you a better figure, so I don't have it off my head, but it could be.
Okay, thank you.
We could be talking a third of the population is in the directories or less. But as you said, more people than you think may appear, particularly for the biggest cities, and that's because there's quite a lot of sole traders in this period. So they are businesses. Even if you were quite a small business operation, if you answered the door and said, "Oh yes, I'm a second-hand clothes dealer," or "I have a market stall," they might well put you in, even if your actual business was quite small, because there's so many. Yeah. So it's worth
grandparents who
persisting.
had my stall, but were listed in the census as not employed. So that will be valuable, and I will certainly take advantage. So thank you for the presentation.
Great, thank you. Susan, would you like to ask a question?
Okay, I put two questions in the chat during your presentation. One was that for those of us who have family in the sort of London area, I've always been quite confused about the difference between looking in London directories and Middlesex directories. So is it that I just have to look in both, or was there a particular time period where, I don't know, Mile End Old Town was Middlesex or London? And the second one, which is also particularly of interest to this group, is can you use wildcards in the searching? Because I've just, while you were talking, I was looking up Pfeiffer, and I found a Pfeiffer that I know lived in Sheffield, and it was quite interesting because he was a clothes dealer and then later became a jeweller. But when I look up other names like Millstone, which was Millstein, and all variations thereof, I need to be able to use wildcards in order to get those different spellings. Is that possible in the search? Thank you.
The London and Middlesex, I would recommend people search London and Middlesex because I think it's probably the safest way of doing it. If you look at the way the London Post Office Directory developed under Kelly's, it's quite clear they knew what the city and county boundaries were, but they were also clearly, if you look at how they developed, there's a point where they're clearly quite not sure how much of London they should have, and particularly with the growth of the rapid growth of the suburbs and the suburban tram and railway network, there's a point where they're not quite sure, should we put everything into London? Should we try and contain London and then put that into Middlesex and Hertfordshire and so on, or into Surrey? So I would recommend searching London and Middlesex particularly, but also London and Surrey as well for South London, because I think it's probably the safest way of doing it. For wildcards, our search engine will do fuzzy searching, where it basically tries to guess for you what some common variants are, and that's to do with the way the originals were OCR'd and tried to be made machine readable. As far as I'm aware, I don't think our search engine will do wildcard searching for you properly. So I would recommend trying different variants of names that you've seen and do it one by one and see what you get. It's probably more manageable and meaningful that way. So that's what I'd recommend doing. But other versions of the collection and other directories collections may do proper wildcard searching instead. And again, if that's the way the ancestry search works, you may find it better for what you need to do.
Great, thank you very much. And the next question is from Ava Lawrence.
Oh, hello. That was brilliant. But if you want to track a person over the years, you've got the census and the directories within a year of each other, and then there's a gap of 8 years. So how would you have intervening directories that in fact you just haven't got online?
Yes, that is a good point of the way that we did the later 19th and Edwardian period. There are a few directories in there for that period which are outside of the census date. So when it was originally done, we were they tried to keep as close to the census date as they could for each of the decade. But if you look at the whole list, sometimes one isn't available for, say, Cardiff, and so it will actually be a slightly later date within the decade. So it's worth looking at the listing, the whole collection, and looking at the dates, because you might get lucky and actually there is one for Cardiff in 1895, and that might help you in that situation. If we don't have it, this might be where either checking the kind of full listing in Ancestry and Find My Past to see if they've filled in gaps. And then it may be time to go to a good reference library that might have the years that you want and looking it up in the traditional way.
Thank you.
Certainly in London, for example, for the post office directories, the Bishopsgate Institute has quite a large collection, which is useful. But thank you for that question. Sue, would you like to unmute? Great.
Yes, I have been using directories for over 20 years because most of my relatives and ancestors were in business, but I still found out one or two new things from this talk. One of the things I'd like to add is I've been to, in the past, some of the libraries in the areas where my family either lived or had businesses. And I found in local libraries, there've sometimes been directories, perhaps that you wouldn't find anywhere else. And those directories have given a lot more information. There was one directory I found, I think it was in the Borough Library, and it had about 2 columns on the business of one of my great uncles or great uncles. So I was quite surprised to find that. It's certainly worth going locally.
Yes, I would definitely endorse that. And although in the directory business, there was this consolidation in the later 19th century and these very famous names emerged, local publishers and printers still produced as you say, often very local directories, either for business or very local street directories. And they are definitely worth looking at, but you need to look at them in print because we didn't digitize them, and I don't know of somebody who has digitized a lot of that kind of print information, but yes, you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any more questions? So Ginny, you're waving your hand. Do you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting talk, thank you. I did research also probably 20 years ago and directories in the Guildhall Library. As a lot of it was microfilm and microfiche, which is not terribly easy to read. And I did take photographs of the screen. They're quite dark, but that's another place. I'm not sure whether they still have any out on shelves there. but it's another local place if people want to go into London to have a look.
I haven't been to the Guildhall Library for some time, but in the stock they have a lot. They have probably one of the largest print collections in Britain. So you're absolutely right. Whether it's all on the open shelf at the moment, I don't know. Somebody here may know better, but it's a very good place to go.
They put a lot behind the scenes.
The London Metropolitan Archives, which is now rebranding itself as the London Archives, I know it has some quite early directories on the open shelves. I mean, from the 17th century, so there's probably later ones there as well. But thank you. If there are no more questions, we will close this part of the meeting. For those who joined us a bit later, our president, Lee Dworkin, sends his apologies. There was a family event that he absolutely couldn't miss today. So I'm afraid that's why you are stuck with me. Before we take a little 15-minute break and go to the workshop section, I would like to thank William for absolutely excellent and really informative talk. I thought I knew the subject and I've learnt a lot. And would just like to ask for a final round of applause for him. And thank you very much. We hope perhaps to be in touch in the future about sort of projects and things on which we can collaborate. But thank you very much to William and to everyone else. We will now take a 15-minute break, and for those who wish, afterwards we will return for a workshop. So many thanks, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you. Let's say at 3:45. Right. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone, to our workshop. I'm afraid we've only got 6 of us. Does anybody have anything they wish to say? Declare your
yes,
brilliant.
I wish I could find the time to do some of my own research.
I have it's a kind of strange experience that I thought I would share and see whether other people have had anything similar. I went last month, and it might be 5 or 6 weeks ago, to East Ham Cemetery to take pictures of the graves of some of my grandparents and some other relatives. And I had got the locations from Find a Grave. And so I went and I found the graves and I took the pictures and came back. I've made them into a little project in which I'm trying to show to all my cousins and their children how we're all related, because my paternal grandparents were, I thought they were the third, but they were actually the second spouses of each other. So the children were in a blended family, which were known as, depending on who was speaking, hers, his, or theirs, or yours, mine, and ours. And in a way, it doesn't matter, but it does if you're trying to research them, exactly what the relationships were. And then I thought, well, the least I can do is to post the pictures of the graves on Find a Grave. Only when I went back, my grandparents were no longer there. And I tried over several days and nothing happened. So I've now put them in as new entries, but I wondered whether anybody had had any experience similar to this. I mean, I wouldn't have found the graves in the first place without having got the information from Find a Grave. And I was a bit surprised that they'd then disappeared.
I suppose this is nothing to do. Raymond says that East Ham is now locked. It's not an open cemetery anymore.
No. Oh, sorry. No, it's open. It's open most days, I think 10 till 3.
That's right.
And I went before 10 on a before 3 on a Friday.
Well,
And
maybe it's changed since.
I also discovered that 2 of the people, the first spouses of my and of the grandparents that I was looking for, are buried in the Plachette Cemetery, which is 2 miles north of there. And I had understood that that was closed, but it appears to be open the same hours as well. So I'm going to go and try and take some pictures there. But I just found it very strange that my paternal grandparents had disappeared. My maternal grandfather, who is there, was still on the Find a Grave listing. And I wondered whether other people had had any sort of odd experiences with using that.
No, nothing
I'm
like
trying
that.
to be systematic now as I get in.
Bernard, you need to check, because Plachette is normally kept locked, especially in view of its location.
Okay, I will check.
But of course, they are all open for a number of hours on the...
They're open on Tisha B'Av.
On the 13th of August.
Yeah, that I know. So I might go then if I'm A, up to it, and B, have the time.
I'm hoping to get to Brady Street and maybe Alderney Road as well on that day.
No, it's my 2 of my great grandparents are buried. They were married to each other, but one is buried in East Ham and the other Plachette. And I went a couple of years ago, and probably the first family member to go there and say Kaddish since like the 1950s, I would think. But, yeah.
I found stones on one of my grandparents' graves, so I'm guessing that somebody had been, although they could have been there for years.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, all my grandparents are in East Ham. I haven't been there for a long time.
And 3 of them.
I'm looking. I don't know if everything is actually on the United Synagogue website. Is everybody who's buried in a United Synagogue, are they listed on their website?
No. Yeah. They're not all there.
So Sue is saying yes, and Gina says no.
They're not all there.
No, you're right, Gina. And it's the same with Willesden. I've found relatives. I've got about 130 relatives buried at Willesden, but some of them I found just by walking round, and they were not on the synagogue database.
Too. Yeah, because actually it does. Sometimes the name is there sometimes, and it says request a photograph, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been looking for something like for a second cousin who died when he was only aged 1. There's just no sign of him anywhere. So I just wondered, people still write? Years ago, I used to write to cemeteries, but I don't know if they'd even answer these days.
I think you can write, but I gather that it can take months for them to reply. I had a request that I'd sent twice, and then Lee very kindly spoke to somebody, and I got a reply within a couple of days. So,
Anita, why don't you just go into the office in Willesden and speak to them?
Why, the Willesden has everybody?
They've got all the directories there. They've got all the burial books there. Yes.
Of all the United Synagogue cemeteries.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay.
Or otherwise Bushy, of course.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Bushy had got all of them. Unless they
Willesden probably only have Willesden, actually, come to think of it, but they have got enormous tomes there.
Yeah.
I've looked at them. But yeah, so it's all on computer in Bushy.
Right.
And they have the books there as well. And
So
you can just walk in and they help.
The US does have its own Find a Grave website.
Yeah,
but it's not very useful because you have to know the information before you can actually look for something. It's always a waste of space. You
That
have
was
to say which you
grand-
need to know, you know, even if you don't know a first name, perhaps you only have a surname, it won't let you search, and you have to know which cemetery as well.
Yeah.
It's not exactly user friendly.
No, whereas the Find a Grave site was useful because it identified my grandparents as being in East Ham, and then gave me the exact plots. Only then when I went back to put pictures on, which I've now done, I've reinstated them on Find a Grave. I've put the pictures on, and so, you know, that's done.
Are they on Cemetery Scribes as well?
I didn't look on Cemetery
I mean, there
Scribes.
are loads of other possibilities apart from the United Synagogue Find a Grave. There's loads of different websites with photographs of graves.
The
I'm not quite.
cemetery scribes are only for older sort of burials. If you want something like a burial in the 1950s, it wouldn't be there.
Oh. No.
I did
I don't know. I've sent them loads of photographs of more. Well, I don't know. Maybe not as recent as that. I'm sure I've sent them Wheelsden and various others.
I went to see my maternal grandmother's grave. She's in the Willesden Liberal Cemetery. And I got that by emailing the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. And they replied the next morning with the plot number, which I thought was pretty good. So in return, when I got there, their map on the prayer hall was completely unusable. So I've redone it for them in color with superimposed on an aerial picture so that people can actually find the plots that they're looking for if they have the plot number. So, and
my mother's siblings and their spouses are buried in that one. I haven't been there for a long time either, mainly because I don't live around there anymore. It's a bit of a long journey for me.
Whilst we have a captive audience, can I just ask, because I'm now sort of finding speakers for the Anglo group, are there any subjects that people are particularly interested in getting speakers for?
I have I have a general thing, which I don't know. I don't think it's sort of specifically for the Anglo-SIG, but an Anglo-SIG session on it would be of interest. On Thursday night, I went to the Sefarad group, which is a group that holds meetings in Spanish from Buenos Aires on a regular basis. And they had a speaker who's a medical history researcher talking about the contribution of Sephardic Jews to medicine over time. It was a very well documented sort of historical analysis of the development of the Jewish medical profession over a couple of thousand years. But I am very interested in the role of Jewish doctors and Jewish medicine, the history of the Jews. And one of the things that I discussed with him was, at the time of inquisitions all across Europe, there was not a monarch or emperor or ruler of a country who did not have a Jewish doctor, and usually related to me in some way. And I'm very interested to sort of have some kind of session about the role of Jewish doctors in the process of the emancipation of Jews, and also of their contribution to medical history. So an Anglo section of it would be interesting.
We have an expert member, but I don't know if he's up to doing talks. He's written loads of books. They're all in the library. on Jewish doctors and dentists and all sorts. That's Michael Jollis.
Yeah, but he wasn't in such good health. I don't
No,
know what his health is
exactly.
like. Yeah.
But I mean, he has already done a lot of research on that.
I tell you what, I wouldn't mind a talk on Jews in the workhouse in sort of Victorian England. I mean, I have come across some family members, and I've just been sort of, when I have brought it up, I've been told, oh, they're not there for very long. You know, the Jewish community finds them and gets them out. And of course, going on with that from that sort of Norwood as well. I think a lot of people are still interested in Norwood.
Oh, and yes, and come to that, the other thing, it's an awful long time since we had that lady tell us about Colney Hatch Asylum and all that work that went into it. That would draw people into the library because they can't see that information any other way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think we've all probably found somebody or other in the workhouse, and you just wonder why did family take them in? Why did they end up there? You know, sort of.
Why did children end up in Norwood when their parents both alive working?
No, they were very fussy. A lot didn't end up in Norwood. They were very, very fussy who they took in Norwood. Very fussy.
Well, of course, that is another project that was never continued. I put all those papers in order.
Yeah.
But that has never been indexed in any way because it's always been sort of a bit taboo.
It's a fascinating reading.
Which one is that?
The Norwood. We've got the Norwood stuff in the library. I found some of my relatives.
It's locked away, David. It's locked away. Many, many years ago, somebody who's no longer with us gave me 2 or 3 big carrier bags full of loose papers.
Yeah.
And asked me to do something with them, put them in order. And they had been gotten surreptitiously, do we say. And they were the applications for the Jews Hospital and Asylum, as it was called, in Mile End.
Yeah.
And I moved all the furniture from my living room and I sat there playing jigsaws with all these hundreds and hundreds of sheets, and it's all been put in order. But I mean, I've got names. I did an index of names, which is on my computer, but there's a lot of information. But unfortunately, some of it is quite sensitive information.
You know what years it covers? What the range?
I think it's 1895 to 1915. Let me just have a look and see if I can find it. Documents.
It's over 100 years, though.
I think they're over 100 years now. It might not have been when I did it.
Do you know how many pages?
I called it Asylum. Hold on. Let me move. It's gone onto the wrong screen. Okay. Let's shut you off. Let's put it on the other screen for some reason. Okay, here we are. That's just the names. Well, there's 13 pages of names. That's just the name index. If I could find the cover sheet for it, maybe.
Doreen started to do some work.
She started it and she couldn't, she gave up because it was too much. I'm trying to see if I got the dates, but
can you remember if this is manuscript or typed or mixture of both?
They were printed sheets.
Okay.
As far as I remember. It was all printed and it had been photocopied by somebody, I believe, at Southampton University.
Yeah.
Okay, here we are. What is this? No, this is some notes I've got at the bottom. I had a cover sheet for it somewhere. How will I find that? London Hospital. No, not the London Hospital. That was a different one.
I would just like to know what happened to the children that Norwood didn't take.
But I think it was 1895 to 1915. But for some reason, I can't see. It may be on my external hard drive because it's so long ago.
Do you think you're talking about like hundreds of pieces of paper, or thousands, or
hundreds? Let me just look at it again, and I will tell you. Well, the pages go up to, I can see 100 pages. You see, what I've done here is I put the names, an alphabetical list of names, and which page numbers they can be found on. Yeah. Some of them applied several times before they got in. So I can see 179, page 179 for a start. That could be maybe the highest. 179, 183. 183.
So that's fairly easy to scan.
They've already been scanned. That's what they are. They're scanned.
Sorry, I thought you said you just had the index and the actual document scanned as well.
What document?
The documents that I index and put in, they were 4 made up one page because it obviously come from a very big ledger. So 4 A4s made up one page, and I had to work out what went where. Yeah. So I said it was like a jigsaw, putting them together.
Okay.
And they had been scanned from other documents in that library. So they are all in a very small font, as far as I remember.
And I think Lydia is quite nervous about.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you know, I've got the index of them here. As I say, that's 13 pages of index, 4,313 words, it says. And Doreen started to do it because it gives the ages of the children and the reason they are being, the reason for the application. It might say something like father in jail for whatever, or mother an imbecile, or, you know, there are comments that are not very pleasant to read. And then it will say things like brother already accepted, and it could say second application.
Yeah.
And you know, and there's bits of personal family information in it, but not many people even know it's there.
Unless you're a library volunteer.
Yes, exactly. Or if you're the one that dealt with it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting reading, though. I mean, I did find some of mine there.
You did? I don't think.
I found it interesting that they gave priority to English Jews as well.
Who?
They gave priority to English-born Jews.
I can't understand what you're saying, Anita.
They gave priority to English Jews.
Oh, English Jews. Right.
Because I had 2, well, I thought they were aunts, but they were actually my mum's cousins, and they were sisters. And they had, I don't know how many years they were there, but their parents were alive. But they were both taken in to Norwood, and then one of them subsequently went back as a house mother. And I remember visiting her in the 1950s, and she'd got into some slight trouble because the house mothers actually cooked for the children at that time. And she had cooked a meal of some kind of meat followed by custard. And one of the children said to her, Mrs. I can't remember which one it was, whether it was Mrs. Hart or Mrs. Phillips. You've just given us meat and now you're giving us custard. And she said, yes, it's good for you. Obviously, whatever they had taught her as a child at Norwood about dietary rules hadn't filtered through.
And that wasn't soya or oatmeal or almond milk.
No. I don't think they had them in the 50s, or at least I don't think they were commercially available in the 50s.
But when I used to go to kosher meals for lunch from school, there was this old witch type woman, and the kids always used to say she brings her own scraggy old boiling chicken and throws it into our pot to cook it. We all hated her.
But Gina, those documents, it's now not difficult to sort of scan and sort of transcribe and so forth.
I don't know. I mean, Doreen was doing it all by hand, which is what I would do as well.
It can
if you like, sorry, Bernard.
Sorry, I was going to say it can be done largely automatically. I mean, there'll be some correction needed, but it's one of the things that has really come on apace. So
you'd have to get permission because it's not ours to be declaring.
Have you?
As I said, it's been got in an underhand manner.
Have you seen the Transcribus software and how it works?
No.
Do you want to? I mean, Bernard is sick of the sight of it, but can I just give you a quick demo, because I think it's stuff that's been done with Sephardic, quite complicated documents that we could do with a lot of what is in the.
Are you doing all the minutes of Bevis Marks?
The accounts books.
The minutes were already done, but the accounts books and the askamot, the decisions.
But are they searchable now? Can you put it?
They will be. I mean, we're just completing the financial.
Going through those page by page is a nightmare.
Well, shall I just give you a quick demo if I share my screen?
You don't have Ali's demo of how he's made it into an ebook, do you? Because that's good, because he's talking about making it into individual books, and he did a beautiful job using AI.
So let's think. Gina, do you have any early families?
Well, how early?
Sort of 1680 or earlier.
Shall I give you an Abendana?
Maybe the Vaz Martinez.
So just do.
Well, the Da Silvas might have been here quite early.
I'll do Martinez Portuguese spelling and just see, because I'm not sure. Okay, so Nunez Martinez we've got.
Yeah, that's her, not me.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just click. This work is not being done by me. I just claim some of the credit, but you can see about how
you're basking in someone else's glory.
Easily. Well, I mean, Bernard is doing a lot of work. David Silvera and Ali Ergensoy especially. But you see, this is just the first search. Let me show you Portuguese Inquisition archive. So if we go, this is the other model. This is Carla Vieira and Friends models from Lisbon. And let me just try and find my computer's getting really slowly. Desktop. Proceso de Miguel de Mendonça. Okay, so let's just take this. So this is just a page from an Inquisition proceso.
Yeah.
it's doing its scanning. And what's being worked on is how, probably using the Python software, we can create a funnel. Okay, so that's the output. Let's copy that and let's just put it into Claude, which is better than ChatGPT. This is text from a, let's see, OCR.
It would actually be good to run it through a checker before you put it into a translator, because there are all sorts of errors which lead to confusion in the translation. But the transcription is improving literally every day. I mean, it's quite remarkable.
So my documents I've got from the Correio do Tombo in Portuguese could go in this, yes?
Yeah.
They may already have been scanned and even translated.
And I've had it translated by a Portuguese lady, but she struggled with the old Portuguese, I have to say.
This is pretty good, actually.
And then you put it into Google Translate, or how?
No, this is, I'm just doing it in Claude AI, which I think is better.
Oh, I see.
But so it's, as I say, I've asked it to correct the text in Portuguese and then give me an English translation. And you know, when I was trying to do a page years ago, I mean, a page would take me sometimes an hour or two, and just look at the quality. It's not perfect, but it's pretty damn good.
Yes.
And there's like 900 pages of that particular processo. So what we want to do is, and there's 40,000 of these Inquisition processos, we want to be able to essentially automate the entire process. And then at the other end, what we're going to do is use sort of natural language processing, essentially to flag up the words that are most of interest. So probably names, dates, places, and that can then be put straight into, automated into a database. And then we
recognize this as,
we know infinitely more. But the point I'm making is, you know, that this is a Portuguese model. There are English models, and this is manuscript, which is obviously more difficult. So it should be possible just to run the Norwood data through.
It goes across the page.
Okay, Ali has
columns, and it goes right across the page with all the different information.
Ali has been working on how to sort of tabulate. I mean, Ali's making really good progress. So
I'm surprised I actually don't have any copies of any of it here, even to show you an example. Let me put.
My guess is that if you approach Norwood now and say to them, look, I've got these documents, they're not even going to ask how you came by them. But if you say, we would like to process them, make them available in the London archives, make them available, you know, wherever and to you, they would be delighted.
Well, I don't know. You see that Lydia would have to be consulted. We can't, because they're, first of all, because they're locked away.
She's a bit nervous about them.
Alternatively, somebody we led off to prison.
I don't want that to be me.
But I think there's a lot of information in the JGSGB library that would could stand being put through. I mean, if we have people and time and money to be digitized and made available, because that might be a way of then attracting more people to JGSGB, which is, I think, one of the issues it has at the moment.
Well, one project I've started on, and it would take ages, and I think I need help on it, is going through the family histories and picking out surnames and possibly places, because all we've got for family histories, and there's about 300 books, 200 to 300 books, all we've got is the title and the author.
Yeah.
And some of the ones I've started on, I'm picking out surnames and places, but it's a long job, and I can only do it if I'm in the library. If I'm helping a visitor, I can't do it. But I think it certainly is a task that if perhaps some of the library volunteers or others can take home batches of books to do that, I think it would be very useful. We've got most of the family trees indexed, not entirely up to date, but I'll be doing that fairly soon. But it's these family histories that aren't indexed properly.
I mean, technology is moving so quickly at the moment that Meta just, everyone's launching their AI software. Meta, that's to say Facebook, has just launched Llama 3.1, which actually operates on a desktop. So the sort of software that I was just using is essentially searching through lots of different resources to give me answers. If essentially the JGSGB could create such a system of its own resources, so that's to say something that is specialized on Jewish genealogy, particularly Anglo-Jewish genealogy, and essentially that would be searchable and give sort of good answers to people beginning to do their research. So it sounds like science fiction, but
sorry. So what do you actually mean by people's family histories? Do you mean published works of family history in the library, or just stuff that people have sent in, sort of typed up?
Yeah.
Whatever?
I know. I think what are you trying to say, that it's people's personal family histories they've done? Once you've got this, AI on it, there's no knowing where it's going to end up, and there's not, you haven't got the permission of the authors to just hand it out willy-nilly, because once it's been scanned, it's out there, isn't it? And it can end up in any other place and being, banded around on Ancestry and My Heritage and Genie and everywhere else, and people might not want that.
You could, I suppose, first of all, you would only share data out of copyright. Now, of course, there could still be some issues with donors, but other information, you could just essentially, it would be indexation. So people would know, like they're searching for Mendoza, and they would then know that there is a document in the library, not about the Mendozas, but referencing the Mendozas, that sort of thing.
Yeah, or 13 documents referencing Mendoza's, so they could go in, spend a happy day going through 13 documents.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of privacy is a fantasy. I'm sure that the various intelligence agents of various countries and Google know more about us than we know ourselves by this point. So I think we're just kidding ourselves. I mean, which is not perhaps a reason to be concerned about privacy, but I think that horse is
two wrongs don't make a right.
But if people put their stuff in the library, in the library, any John, Dick, or Harry can make an appointment within reason to come into the library and see what's there.
Presumably, if they put it into the library, it was because they want the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I've just done this thing, as I said, I've done this it's an animation showing how all my cousins on my dad's side are related, or how their parents were all related. And I've done it as a video, and I'm going to put it on YouTube, but I'm not going to do it until they've all had a chance to comment. But, you know, everybody who's looked at it so far thinks it's a great thing to do, you know, to share this information so that, and it's correcting. I mean, I had wrong births, marriage and death dates from every one of the major genealogy programs, companies, which meant that I ended up with the final marriages between my grandfather and my grandmother taking place before my grandfather's first wife had died and before 2 of her children were born. So, you know, in going through and picking the information out, and then I had to go back and check it against GRO records, which, you know, they also have mistakes. But from those, I was able to get enough, what I think is reliable birth and death data. I can't find all the marriages, but, you know, I'm working on that. But, you know, I've told the cousins that it is my intention to put it on YouTube, and they're all happy.
I think the JGSGB should probably be encouraging people to do that sort of
Yes.
thing, or back up records. I'm you know, Kevin Martin of blessed memory, we've just got his documents thanks to Gina, and you know, I'm kind of concerned that, you know, when I put my clogs, that all my work should not die with me. That being said, I say some well, my late father, in his, I had him write a memoir. He wrote some pretty awful things about some people, and I have similar stuff. So I suppose I would want to be safely dead before before that gets into the public domain. But I would like it to go into the public domain. Because otherwise it's just, you know, years of wasted effort.
And my guess is that people who've put stuff in the library were basically saying, I want this to be shared. I mean, you know, the concept of public-private domain is perhaps a little sophisticated for people who don't think about these things, but I think that we can generally take it that unless specified otherwise, the intention was it should be available for others to share.
I
can tell
don't
you that a lot of people who donated books to the library and trees said that they were not to be put available online or shared. They're for people who come to the library, either members or visitors.
Is that of recent years, though? Is that of recent years, or is that some time ago?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
Is that of recent years, or is that some time ago? Because things have changed a lot.
I know, but some of it I should think is in the last 10 years or so. I've been involved in the library about 15 years, and quite a lot of people who've donated trees and things like that have been specific that they do not want it put online.
But the trouble is, so people come in and they photograph everything. Can't guarantee that it's not going to go online, because they come in and you see them photographing everything.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
They photograph everything. Everything is photographed. You can't, you know, you can't monitor what people are doing in the library.
No.
Well, it's not so much.
But when people donate.
Perhaps the thing is, though, if somebody has shared information, say before about the year 2000, and have never heard of the internet, they might be quite comfortable for people, you know, coming into this sort of dusty library to have a look at it, but they might not want, you know, the dirty laundry to be, you know, easily searchable across the internet. I mean, there's some quite, yeah, you know, there's information that one, well, not me, but, you know, other people may not want to be online about them or about their relatives. So it is a little bit uncomfortable.
I suppose the only thing we could do in that case is to contact people first for the family histories and ask them if they're willing to let it go out. And
what
if
about
not,
people who are no longer with us? What about people who are no longer with us? Are we going to have a
well, it has
say?
to be their descendants, or if they're no longer.
It's very complicated.
Yeah.
I think it's just too complicated and too much work. You know, we just don't have the people to do it. I mean, a lot of people have passed on and donated work, and to try and find their descendants, they could be anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe 100-year rule, but I mean, none of us will be around then. So.
Yeah.
And that's also a nightmare. I mean, I gave a load of my mother's papers after she died. I was leaving the country in 1979, and I gave them to what was then the Museum of Labour History. And I came back sort of the best part of 20 years later and wanted to look at some of them. The Museum of Labour History had closed. The documents had been transferred to the Museum of People's History in Manchester. They had decided, but I had no way of knowing this, that her papers really belonged in London. So they donated them to the London Metropolitan Archive. So I turned up at the London Metropolitan Archive and was told I couldn't see them because they mentioned people who might still be alive. And therefore, I would have to wait another 75 years to see the documents that I had donated that had ended up there. And my workaround is that I go in once or twice a month, and I am digitizing my mother's documents, and where there are any which contain names of people, individuals, not people in organizations, but people who might be identified as individuals, I do 2 digitized copies. One is blank, one is one is full and one is redacted. But it's an enormous amount of work for me just to try and get access to the documents that I gave them. And I think there has to be a better way of doing it. And I think we should actually think about that. Maybe we could have a session to talk about how to deal with information, and particularly this question of stuff that's been donated before the internet, and whether or not we can have a policy to deal with it.
Yeah, my father gave some correspondence between my grandfather and great-grandfather during the First World War to the RAF Museum, and because my grandfather was in the Royal Flying Corps, and they don't know what's happened to these letters. It's just terrible.
At least I know where where my mum's documents are, and they get them out. They kind of come on a big trolley in 40 boxes. I actually left some money for them to curate the collection, but that didn't help. And my aim was to make them available to the public, not for them to be hidden away. But that was before the introduction of the GDPR regulations. And they got to the London Metropolitan Archive around the time that the regulations were coming in on privacy.
Yeah, it was a shame, because with the Colney Hatch, my great-grandfather, who was sort of erased from the family history, was in Colney Hatch with a social disease, and we knew that the document was there. We knew there was an image, and we had no idea what he looked like. And my father and I wanted to see it, but it was under the 100 years rule, and sadly my father died sort of two years before we could see it. And I think we were the only people that probably had any interest in it, and of course the only ones with a meaningful connection. But that's just a shame. But the answer is, I look like my great-grandfather, who died of syphilis.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I've had access to a lot of documents that were handed in at, I think it's the British Film Institute, about Peter Sellers, letters he wrote, and letters that his mother wrote, and his grandmother, and I think they were all just dumped there by probably, I think it was his mother-in-law, his last mother-in-law, whichever wife that was. And I mean, you know, even somebody like his daughter can't just have them. Really, they should be hers.
Yeah.
And I have photographed everything, and I can't really do much with them. They allowed me to look at them. I applied. I sat there for a day, and I photographed everything. But what do I do with them? Can't do anything.
But it would be good to actually have a discussion and see if we can develop a policy that, you know, where we can have different ranges of permissions, ways of contacting people, a rule of thumb for people who no longer have any descendants.
That's something for David to discuss at council, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the new boy. I think at first meeting I just have to shut up and listen. No, I mean, you know, I'm new there, and it's much more complicated.
They don't like fresh blood coming and telling them what to do.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, hopefully, I mean, if they want, because, you know, with Ton and then also with the Anna Hebreka project, I have experience of equivalent projects. Then if they want, then there's, you know, experiences I can share. But, you know, I thought I should give something back, as, you know, I attend lots of meetings and stuff, but, you know, if they want, they want, if they don't, they don't. I mean, it's just
you could just bring it up onto AOB and see what they have to say. You don't sort of put it forward, you'll never know how if the idea would be taken or not.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to be seen as treading on people's feet, though. That's the problem.
No, I wouldn't worry about it. I really wouldn't worry about it.
Famous last words. But it's much more complicated. I mean, you know, Ton and I will you know, have a 2-minute chat, and we go off and do something, and the JGSGB has, you know, subcommittees and minutes and everything else, and
they chew the cud for a few years before they
well, I mean,
because your organization is young, wait until it's had a few years to develop and has gone off into specialist areas and decided that it needs, unless AI can manage it all. I mean, you know, that may actually bring about possible changes in the way we work on these things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, sort of what all these different, you know, all of us are doing within Sephardic genealogy was basically born within the internet over the last few years, and indeed, and that's our Hebreka, you know, with AI already involved, whereas the JGSGB has been around since the 1980s. In fairness to the JGSGB, it has substance, which we lack. It has resources, which we lack, and it has a very, very healthy bank balance, which we lack. So I'm not gonna diss them, but you know, it would be, you know, I think there's helpful things that could be done if they were if they were interested. But I think anyway, for the first couple of meetings, I'll just, you know, shut up and listen.
You might raise it as a question, and so that you could bring it up next time with a suggestion or a range of suggestions. In other words, you know, you're not proposing anything, but you'd just like to know, how does this work? You know, do we have a policy on? And let people kind of dwell on it. until the next meeting.
Yeah, you're much more of a diplomat than me.
I think I am, but yes. Although I wasn't with Daniel Horowitz.
No, but he well, deserved is not the right word, but it just wasn't very interesting what he was saying, I thought.
What it did was show that these genealogy online programs are basically, as I said, they're entertainment. And so they're marketing them as entertainment. And he said it's not for people who are serious like us.
Well, that's on one side. On the other side, I assume they're selling to corporations, or will be selling to corporations, like detailed family trees and genetic trees and so forth. So there is that that serious side. But I mean, what you said was exactly right. I mean, I'm not really interested in seeing, you know, my great-grandmother sort of blinking or dancing the can-can. I just want to you know, see the data.
Mind you, I quite like seeing all the photographs that they did of my daughter as a, you know, an Egyptian goddess and a Greek goddess. Putting the, you know, he just supplied them with the photos, and they.
Yeah, no, that's fun, but that's entertainment. And when I said they do not have a system whereby you can correct factual errors when you've got the documentation, and none of them do.
No, they don't believe in quality control at all. It's just a word that they don't understand.
Yeah, because that's not what's important to them. What's important to them is bringing people in on the all singing, all dancing Egyptian princesses or whatever.
Yeah. Because when Randy Schoenberg was talking to Sephardic World about the Geni, GENI .com, you know, what I was saying to him is,
don't you mean .com?
Well, I'm not on it, but you know, he's on it, and Jarrett uses it, and other
I use it, but differently from them.
But what I was suggesting there is that they just have sources. If they can link to sources, and then they can grade the different things that people have put in, it would very quickly start to improve the quality. Because I mean, you know, obviously Sephardic family trees are typical, and you know, this is being recorded. Let's not say that gentleman's name, but there was a gentleman who has had a website. I think he's taken it down now, in which you know, any names and things were just put together, like, you know, 5-year-olds with jigsaw puzzles, and having, you know, sources would have made life much easier.
But they're doing that now. They've moved forward enormously on that, on the question of sourcing and on the question of consistency, which MyHeritage hasn't. And looking at the stuff I took from my cousin's ancestry site in order to try and sort out about my grandparents, they haven't either. And Genie has. It's gone the way of Wikipedia. You know, they've now got people checking, and they're checking against, you've got to be able to verify stuff if there's any kind of dispute, whereas that doesn't arise with MyHeritage, and as far as I know, with Ancestry.
Well,
sorry, this tree of the Jewish people, I find that scary. You know, I mean, because
yes, if it fell into the wrong hands.
You know, I mean, most of it is probably fiction.
So I didn't hear that.
The tree of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of that is just fiction. It's just nonsense. Most of what's on that tree, on those trees.
Probably.
I don't know it. The tree of the Jewish people.
Yeah, I see that
on Genie or MyHeritage.
I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what they're doing. They're just trying to link up all the trees That's why you keep getting these messages saying that we've matched your tree. If you join it to this one, you can add another 193 people.
Oh no, that's My Heritage. Jeannie doesn't do that.
Well, they're the same thing, aren't they?
Oh, they're not the same thing. They are very, very different. Jeannie only has single entries. If you've got duplicate family trees, they contact you to say there is a duplicate family tree for this person. Would you like to merge them? Whereas My Heritage encourages you to have your own tree, and it won't take factual corrections. It'll take agreements to merge. They keep sending me things on My Heritage saying, you know, you are related to this person. Would you like to merge? And when I look, it's wrong. And then I just
get them all the time. I just ignore them. And
yeah, but that's not Jeannie. That's My Heritage. Jeannie doesn't work like that at all.
Well, I'm not a member of Jeannie anymore. I just you know. But they're just ridiculous with the way that they link the family, the names to make you related to somebody through another 25 people and their cats.
Well, I've just gone into Jewish Gen, and they've got the family tree of the Jewish people with links. So I don't know what that is all about.
Okay, but I don't know this Jewish tree on Jeannie, so I'll have a look for it. I'm not aware of it. Anyway, I've got to go. I'm going to.
Shall we bring the meeting to an end? So just to remind everyone that there is on Tuesday the 6th, there is a library session which needs to be booked, and on Sunday the 11th at 2 o'clock, Joy Kestenbaum will be talking about reconstructing Jewish families from a small Polish shtetl, confronting gaps in the historical record, which actually should be rather interesting, I think. So let me just look down my list of instructions from Lee. I should thank everyone for attending. So thank you everyone for attending.
Our pleasure.
And we
just
shall.
2 of us are your cousins. That's we can't.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's a rather incestuous group. I think apart from Sue, I sort of like either related or know them very well. But no, thank you very much. And as I said, Lee had a family obligation. Otherwise, of course, he would have been here to host. And speaking with my great authority from the JGSGB, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and see everyone soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.